Hey everybody, it's Curse, and today I'm going to bless you with what I'd love to see in Last Epoch's 1.1 patch. And I'm going to start off with apologizing for my voice. I'm still a tiny little bit sick, but I wanted to share my thoughts, so I thought I'd power through it, and who knows, tomorrow might be even worse. So we'll just YOLO and roll with it. So Last Epoch officially launched in February, roughly 1 month ago, and the last 1 month has been absolutely phenomenal for EHG. They achieved some insane concurrent player counts. The reviews were fantastic. There were some minor hiccups with servers in the first week, but honestly for me, those were not a big deal. They were just minor inconveniences at worst. Looking back at launch, yeah, I certainly remember them, but it did not taint my experience during that first 1 week. And I know that it did for some folks out there. And so I do want to stress that what I'm sharing today in this video is my personal opinion, and I fully recognize that not everybody's going to agree with it, but that's all right. And to further highlight where I'm coming from, if you talk to a lot of people and you ask them what they want to see in 1.1, most will tell you, and especially anybody coming from a PoE background, they'll tell you that they want to see more endgame content. The endgame content is not on par with PoE. I would make the argument that it is far superior to Diablo 4, however, but overall, I'm very happy with the endgame content in Last Epoch. Sure, I would love to see more, but to me, that's an inevitability. That's something that ESG definitely has in their plans. So I'm not too worried about endgame content. Even the game as it currently stands is very enjoyable for me. I have quite a few hours in it. And I want to again commend ESG on the beautiful and really well crafted endgame loop and interaction of systems that they have created. You can see the ingenuity, the creativity, and the passion that has gone into this game. And I don't say that lightly. I truly believe that this is a labor of love. And this kind of labor of love effort is exactly how Blizzard North created Diablo 1 and Diablo 2, as well as GGG created the PoE. And now ESG have made their mark in the ARPG genre with Last Epoch. So hats off to them. Great work, ESG. And thank you for having created such a masterpiece. The reason why I enjoy Last Epoch more than a lot of other games is the room for creativity. ESG have basically created a sandbox for us to play around with, to test different things in, and to see what we can create in it. And this is where I would pinpoint my personal preferences as to what I would like ESG to focus on. They've created this beautiful sandbox, and they've given us a plethora of tools to have fun with and enjoy. However, upon closer inspection, half of the tools that we touch are broken or oversized or just plain wrong. It is no secret to anybody playing Last Epoch that the game has a ton of bugs. I have been very vocal about my hopes for a massive bug fix patch and a bug fix concentrated effort on EHG's side since probably about 6 months ago. My biggest gripe 6 months ago were to do with multiplayer. Multiplayer was basically unplayable until maybe 1.0. And even in 1.0, we still have issues with certain multiplayer interactions. If somebody is loading and somebody tries to TP on them, that kind of glitches out. And there are a few other instances where multiplayer becomes a bit problematic. It's definitely in a playable state though with 1.0, so don't get me wrong. I managed to get a 4-man Necromancer party from level 1 to Empowered Monoliths, and we only had to reset our game maybe 4 or 5 times during those, let's say, 10-hour period. I would love it if I can get through that 10-hour gaming period with a bunch of buddies with, I don't know, a maximum of 1 issue and a maximum of 1 reset. But even worse than that is the state of skills and items and just tooltips in general in the game. Most veterans in Last Epoch have developed a very necessary distrust of tooltips. That is not a good state to be in. The fact that there is frequently a discrepancy between what a skill or an item states it will be doing versus what it is actually doing is very alarming to me. And it is something that I was hoping would potentially disappear with 1.0, but unfortunately, that is not the case. So I would love to see a spring cleaning effort in which both bugs and balance issues get heavily targeted by EHG so that we can have a much cleaner 1.0. So to elaborate a little bit more on the bug side, I played a lot of Warlock with 1.0, and my passive skill tree at the top right corner, we have Aspect of Death, not giving us more damage per negative ailment on you, even though it certainly states that it does. And then we have a Wreak Havoc. That is the silliest one of them all. It says critical multiplier plus 8% per passive skill point. Unfortunately, if you actually add that passive skill point, it only gives you 5% crit multi. Those are just two examples of some very simple to test passive skill nodes that are clearly bugged. We've already had a lot of issues with skill nodes not being exactly working as intended in 1.0, so much so that ESG had to release a survey about mid-cycle bug fixing, etc. And I do think the survey was a really great idea, and I appreciate ESG for going through with that. But regardless of the survey itself, I think it's pretty obvious that ESG are in a lose-lose situation, regardless of whether they choose to bug fix or not to bug fix. If they bug fix, there's going to be a non-zero segment of the player base that are going to be upset about it, and they're going to leave the game and potentially never come back. If they choose to not bug fix, same thing. There's going to be a non-zero part of the player base that are going to be upset because clearly you're not fixing bugs, and my build is underperforming relative to that bug build, so they're going to leave the game and potentially never come back. Both outcomes are problematic for ESG. So what I would love to see for 1.1 is not only a concerted effort to reduce the existing number of bugs as much as possible, but also a greater effort into not introducing as many new bugs based on the new content being added with the next patch. And I fully recognize that ESG have put and are actively putting tremendous effort into bug fixing in the past. I'm just saying that I would love to see an effort that is greater than the previous amounts of effort put into it. Because going off of the past experiences that we've had here, ESG put themselves in this lose-lose situation by letting through so many bugs into 1.0. I think it is certainly in ESG's, but also in the player base's best interests for more of these bugs to get caught earlier on and to not actually go into production. Alternatively, ESG can try to create for themselves an exit ramp out of this lose-lose situation by creating a third option. Instead of just the bug fix versus not bug fixed in the middle of the cycle options, this is an idea that came from Nish, who's a big friend of the channel, so shout out to him. What ESG could do is set up a 1 week period at the beginning of every patch, where at the end of the week, the top arena contenders win some sort of cosmetic item award for their efforts in arena. And then this 1 or say 2 week period can then be used to apply a patch that fixes the most problematic bugs in the brand new season, which is then followed by a ladder reset. This way the player base gets to look forward to racing to 100, racing to get to the highest arena waves in the first 1 week, which is not going to be fully min-maxed. It's not going to have the best gear in the game potentially, but it will likely use the most bugged and the most abusive builds in the game. That will enable ESG to easily spot those and bug fix them so that the remainder of the season can at least be clean. And then that remainder of the season will not be so much about racing, but it will be more about min-maxing your gear, getting that 4 LP item of whatever slot that you can think of, and getting that triple tier 7 exalted item to slot into your 4 LP Wings of Argentus, let's say. So this is one possible way to turn a lose-lose situation of bug fixing and not bug fixing mid-cycle to a win-win where both ESG gets something out of this 1 or 2 week race period, as well as the player base gets something fun to look forward to at the beginning of every season, and then being able to enjoy a clean latter part of the season. Anyway, this is just one idea that will also come with its own issues and problems that may require solving. So I'm just throwing it out there in case it helps. I am also fully confident that ESG are actively looking into solutions for the predicament that they have found themselves in. But something that I really want to stress is that the number of bugs that get introduced with every patch needs to be less than the number of bugs that get remedied with every patch. It is very obvious that if that is not the case, you end up with a buggy mess of a game that will be very difficult to address later on. And what I'm commenting on doesn't just have to do with bugs that were introduced into the game with 1.0 and with the 2 brand new classes. There are many bugs that have existed in the game for a very long time and will continue to do so unless addressed. I think a good example is the bug with Ballista. My impression is that the bugged node of ARM construction was bugged prior to 1.0. It's not that 1.0 bugged it. It's that the increased area was not calculating based off of area, but it was calculating based off of radius way before 1.0 was released. So if that was caught and addressed earlier, that could have saved a lot of headache for a lot of people, and it could have saved us one flame more on the forums. So these are just some examples of skill nodes and skill bugs that should not have gone unresolved into 1.0. So I just wanted to highlight that it's not just about bugs that are net new added into the game, but also about existing bugs that have been around for a while and actually have a decent impact on the game. Especially if you're playing hardcore, you probably want to be invulnerable as your skill node says that you should be. And the second major reason that I would love to see a spring cleaning effort from EHG is balance. The game is in the worst state of balance that it has ever been in. If we oversimplify the game in DPS and survivability, just 2 parameters. When it comes to the damage side, some classes outperform other classes to such a degree that it's likely a factor of at least 10x. These kinds of disparities in damage and in balance and the continuous power bloat that we see with every single patch are simply not sustainable. There needs to be a more rigorous system designed at EHG that can actually quantify the relative balance of brand new builds or brand new skills or brand new items being added into the game and put it on a graph and tell you whether this skill is outperforming everything else available in that class or in any other class by a factor of 2x or maybe 3x or 10x. If it's a factor of 2x and EHG are looking to create some hype around that skill or that item, and let everybody have some fun with it, let's say, that's probably fine. 2x is probably fine. But when it comes to a factor of 10x or 50x or whatever, then we're entering a territory of silliness that just breaks the game. And the same goes on the survivability side. If there is a subclass that has a very hard time scaling ward, so it's basically capped at 4 to 5k HP, that is the survivability maximum that it can attain, with potentially a bunch of damage reduction supplements to that. But then if you have classes that can easily get to 50, maybe 100,000 ward, again, that sort of balance is problematic and it breaks the game. I remember when Ashes of Mortality unique ring got first introduced into the game, it was generating so much ward, you could easily get something like 50 to 100k ward. And that was pretty much the only way you could do that at that point of time in the game. And everybody was in agreement that that's just silly, that's just broken. And the ring got patched. And I think there was a cooldown added, but the cooldown, it wasn't sufficient, it wasn't enough. Or maybe the ward numbers were still too high. And so you could still generate 20, maybe 30,000 ward. And that 20 to 30,000 ward was still deemed way too overpowered. And there was a second patch to address this item. None of those were bug fixes. Both of those were just fixing a broken, stupid, overpowered item that was released without enough testing. And thankfully, ESG took swift action and addressed the item and maybe even over-nerfed it a bit, I'm not sure. But at the end of the day, this item does not now make it so that you can automatically get up to 50,000 ward by just equipping it. So those were good fixes. I think those were necessary fixes that I would love to see in the future, where we don't get Ashes of Mortality being released into the official patch, and we don't get things like Healing Hands being released into the official patch. But all of this that I just described hinges on a strong and robust system of benchmarking and being able to rank order and compare one item or one skill or one build versus another. Basically, ESG need to maintain a build tier list internally so that they can evaluate every new item, every new skill, every new interaction, every new skill adjustment, whatever, such that if they're introducing something that is 10 times better than the current best builds in the game, well then probably that would generate way too much power bloat, and it's not a good idea in the long term. My favorite meme scenario that I brought up once during my stream is, Can you imagine playing with your friend and your friend is like, all right, I'm going to fire up Forge Guard. What are you playing? And you're like, yeah, I'm thinking about playing Falconer. And the Falconer clears everything multiple screens away, just deletes all content in the game without even blinking. And here's Mr. Forge Guard just trying to keep up. Worst of all, one of their mobility skills, Lunge, needs an enemy to click on. So if your Falconer friend has killed every single enemy, you can't even catch up. Your mobility skill is useless. Or just imagine Forge Guard just goes, all right, friendo, let me test out my build. I'm going to kill this boss by myself. You just stay there and watch. And the Forge Guard starts whacking the boss. 2 minutes later, it's like, okay, I got him to half HP. The Falconer gets bored, steps in, half a second later, boss is dead. And I want to stress here that I'm not saying that Falconer should be nerfed right now. My point is Falconer should never have been released in the state that it is today. My main point is that I would love for EHG to develop some more robust systems, like I said, of stress testing and min-maxing and benchmarking builds and new classes versus existing builds and existing classes. And it's completely possible that I'm totally wrong and EHG had full intent to release Falconer as it is released today in order to generate popularity for the game, in order to get some views, because people like overpowered stuff. But you just have to keep in mind for every overpowered build, whether it is Warlock or Falconer, there's a Forge Guard out there that's crying themselves to sleep and hating their life. The same notion goes for the Wraith Guard helmet. It deals probably 5 times to 10 times more damage than anything else the Necromancer can put together. And to me, that should not be happening. And I want to stress, I'm not advocating for any patches or any whatevers on Wraith Lord right now. This is more of a step back, retrospective, high-level analysis on what direction I would love to see from EHG heading into 1.1. So those are my thoughts for 1.1. I know we will definitely see new content, so I'm not worried about that. I know I will likely enjoy it. I've enjoyed pretty much every other content that EHG have put out. The game is just overall quite a bit of fun. Obviously, I would like some adjustments here and there for content, but the biggest thing that I would love to see is spring cleaning. That includes bug fixing for every single class, for every single skill, for every single skill node, item, every single passive node, just a complete spring cleaning to make sure that the quality of the game from a number of bugs perspective matches the supreme quality of execution and vision throughout the rest of the game. And same thing goes for balance. The lack of balance is very much at odds with the extremely high level of quality of everything else that EHG have produced. So I would just love them to take a moment to bring those two aspects of the game on par with everything else. But again, this is just my personal opinion, so don't sweat it too much. And if you made it through the entire video, thank you for listening. And please let me know whether or not you agree in the comments and what you would like to see in 1.1. Because like you guys already know, I'm quite curious just to get a overall sense of where everybody's at. I just find that kind of data gathering interesting overall. So thank you everybody, take it easy, and gochiso sama deshita.